Everyone knows the UFC is the biggest name in MMA, but here's the uncomfortable truth. Being the biggest also means being the most powerful. Too powerful. Powerful enough to tell fighters what they're worth. Powerful enough to make $12 million on a live gate while paying the opening fight card less than a car mechanic. So how did we get here? Let's talk about money, monopolies, and the business behind the brawls. Let's start with the basics. You make it to the UFC. Finally. Years of blood, broken noses, missed birthdays, and sleeping on floors just to chase a dream. You fought in regional circuits, driven across state lines for a last-minute opponent, and eaten instant noodles just to save on groceries. And now, you sign your first UFC contract. Congratulations. You're now making $10,000 to show up, and another $10,000 if you win. But that money vanishes fast. You pay your coaches, your gym, your manager. You might fly out your cornermen, book your own hotel. You pay for meals, for supplements, for doctors. Some fighters even cover their own medicals and gear. And what's left? Maybe $4,000 or $5,000 if you're lucky. That's for months of training, for weeks of brutal weight cuts, for permanent damage to your brain. In 2024, that's less than a full-time DoorDash driver makes hustling 7 days a week. And yet, somehow, the UFC just keeps smashing revenue records. So why are fighters still being paid like part-time side characters in their own story? It wasn't always like this. In the early 2000s, the UFC had legitimate rivals. Pride FC in Japan was electric. Bigger crowds, bigger paydays, and a different flavor of violence. Strikeforce brought exciting matchups and real TV exposure. WEC gave lighter weight classes a platform to shine. Even Elite XC, chaotic as it was, offered fighters a different route to fame. There was freedom. There were options. If you didn't like the UFC's terms, you could shop around. You had leverage. But instead of outcompeting those promotions, the UFC did something far more efficient. They bought them and buried them. Pride, purchased, paraded, then discarded. WEC, absorbed and dissolved. Strikeforce, swallowed whole. Elite XC, imploded, then scavenged. Each acquisition stripped fighters of alternatives. And with each rival that fell, the UFC's grip on the sport tightened. Suddenly, the octagon wasn't just the biggest stage, it was the only stage. And when there's only one stage left, there's only one boss to answer to. For a while, Bellator looked like it might stand its ground. It had legit talent. Michael Chandler, Douglas Lima, Patricio Pitbull, even aging legends like Rampage Jackson and Chael Sonnen gave the roster some spark. But Bellator was never the UFC. Bad leadership, awkward matchmaking, poor promotion. Eventually, Bellator got sold off to PFL, another promotion trying to break through the UFC's shadow. Let's be honest, if you're a fighter today, your real choice is UFC or obscurity. And when one company owns the spotlight, they control everything that comes with it. Who you fight, when you fight, how often you fight, even what you wear walking to the cage. Back in the day, fighters looked like NASCAR cars, covered in sponsor patches. And it worked. Some made six figures in sponsorships alone. That income helped them train full-time, invest in recovery, support families. Then came the Reebok deal. Logos vanished. Uniforms came in. Fighters became walking billboards, but not for themselves. Now, Venom handles the gear. And instead of real sponsorship income, fighters get a tiered bonus. You fought 1 to 3 times? Congrats. $4,000. It goes up gradually from there, but even veterans barely scratch what they once earned independently. It's less freedom, less visibility for personal brands, less money. And here's the kicker. Fighters can't opt out. Even pay-per-view revenue, one of the few big money avenues, is locked behind thresholds. You don't see a bonus unless the event crosses 500,000 buys, which means you're not just fighting your opponent, you're fighting the system. Now let's be fair. If you're a superstar, John Jones, Conor McGregor, Adesanya, you're getting paid. You move the needle. You fill arenas. You generate millions. But for the other 90% of the roster, they're stuck at 10K to 10K, a number that hasn't changed in over a decade. Meanwhile, UFC pay-per-view prices have nearly doubled. Live gates are hitting 8 figures. The company is now worth billions under its parent company, TKO Group, formerly Endeavor. Dana White brags about record-breaking gates, like he's announcing a prize at a casino. So why hasn't the base pay moved? Simple. It doesn't have to. Most major sports leagues have players' unions. NFL, NBA, MLB, even minor league baseball players have formed unions in recent years. But MMA, no union, no collective bargaining, no guaranteed base salary. Why? Because organizing fighters is nearly impossible. They're isolated, spread across countries. They speak different languages, fight in different weight classes, and fear losing their shot at the spotlight. If a rising fighter speaks up about pay or treatment, there's always someone else willing to stay silent and take their place. Silence is rewarded. Rebellion is replaced. Some people defend the UFC by saying, it's just business. And yeah, maybe it is. The UFC is insanely well run. It built MMA into a global phenomenon. It survived near bankruptcy and turned cage fighting into primetime entertainment. But being successful doesn't excuse exploitation. Fighters are the product. They risk their lives. They sell the show. They take the hits, literally. They deserve more than a decade-old starting pay and a contract they can't negotiate. So what's the solution? Start your own promotion? Good luck. Convince fighters to unionize? Easier said than done. The UFC has the leverage, the name, the platform, and as long as fighters keep showing up for $10K and a dream, nothing's gonna change. But hey, at least the seats are comfy. $12,000 for floor tickets, more than some fighters take home on fight night. Welcome to the fight game, where the real battle isn't in the octagon, it's in the boardroom.